Hello, everyone. I'm your host, Ahad Hussain, and welcome to Season 4 of Titan Alumni Talk, a weekly podcast where we talk to alumni about their experiences at Cal State Fullerton. For this week's episode, we have David Miller, who is the Director of Entertainment Services at the Disneyland Resort. He graduated in 1998 with a double bachelor's in Communications and Theater. Listen as we talk about his experiences at Cal State Fullerton and the work that he does at Disney. You can catch these episodes live at 11 a.m. on Tuesdays at titanradio.org, or you can watch all past episodes on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/CSUF alumni. Enjoy! Thank you, David, for joining us on the podcast today.
Happy to be here. Thank you.
Awesome. So let's just get started with your time at Cal State Fullerton. So to begin with, you did get a BA in Communications, and you actually did a double major. So you also got a bachelor's in Theater as well. So where did this kind of come from to get into the entertainment industry? Was this something that you always wanted to do when you were younger? Or is this something that you kind of just figured out in college that it was kind of your calling?
Yeah, interesting that you ask. When I started, which was a few years ago, I was really interested in radio, which at the time was one of the main mediums that we had going on. And Cal State Fullerton was one of the few that had a radio, TV, and film department. And then the year I started, they dropped the radio part. So then I was a little bit kind of off my game about what I was going to do. But that said, it was an exciting time to be able to try and figure out what I was going to do in the world. And so I leveraged that communication. I mean, TV and film was another great opportunity. So just because one was out doesn't mean the others weren't good opportunities. And then I found that I always needed a lot to do, and theater was another great interest of mine. And I wasn't sure what part of theater. Ultimately, I ended up deciding to double major, as you mentioned, and I was in the acting program. And when I was doing it, I realized, acting was fine and I could do it, but it wasn't my passion. And one day they had said to me, hey, if you want to be part of the theater group, you're going to have to devote some time toward being on the backstage crews. And at the time I was working at Disneyland, just a summer job that extended a little bit. And I decided, well, I won't be able to work a crew because those conflict with the times I was going to be working. So what else could I do? They said, you could do hours during the day, during the week in one of these locations. And they basically picked me up by the scruff of my neck and dropped me in a room full of lights and said, here you go. And I met an amazing group of people in what was the Cal State Fullerton Light Room for the theater and dance department. And that really helped me. It really formed what I ended up doing to get me to where I am today.
And then right after you got your bachelor's, you transitioned into getting your master's at UCLA, and it was specifically in lighting design. So is that a really big department? I guess that's kind of like overlooked, sort of like sound and some other categories, right? We kind of don't really see it, but if it's not there, then we're kind of questioning what's wrong with it. So
and that's exactly right. I think honestly, the thing about lighting is you don't know that if you are only feeling something but not thinking, oh, what is that light over there? Then we're doing our job, right? We don't want to call attention to the work we do. We want it to seem organic and natural. And it really was something that called to me. And there's a couple of reasons why lighting design, and it was lighting design for theater at the time, although at UCLA, I was able to do a little bit of TV. The idea for me is that it's twofold. It's not just creative. It's not just technical. It's both. It is creative in that it's about color and angle and shadow and light and where it falls and how it hits. That's all the creative side of it, the nuance. Then there's the technical part. It's the actual levels. If it's from 0 to 100%, where does that go? How do we use the computer to make crossfades or other ways to heighten the awareness of what's going on, to draw out a scene, to bring highlights to a certain area of a show that you're seeing? Those are all very intentional for the most part. I mean, we do have happy accidents when it comes to lighting, but for the most part, it's very intentional about how we're driving focus. Expanding what people can see and getting them to feel something different. That had the light, if it was just one regular light, it would be a harder sell.
I see. So it's not just you standing there with a spotlight, putting it on people. It's a lot more technical, and there's a lot more intricacy that goes on behind the scenes where
it definitely, you're right about that. It definitely is. And for me, it really became a huge passion. It's just one of those things that you go and you enjoy a show and you talk about the directing and you talk about the acting and you talk about the script. And sometimes you'll talk about the costumes and seeing the items that you can tangibly see. Lighting sometimes doesn't always get that. But again, I think we're being successful if you're feeling something without knowing how it's coming.
And I guess that's also like ties in with music. You kind of don't like realize the score that is going on behind the scenes until you kind of listen or watch the movie multiple times over, or you kind of have an ear for music. But for a regular movie watcher, it's just something that is doesn't really play its own specific role. It kind of just enhances what we're seeing on the screen.
That's exactly right. It's very similar in how we do that.
And then right after that, kind of after you graduated from UCLA, you did get into lighting specifically. You've done quite a bit of work for cruises, for special events where you did work on lighting. So is this something that was a calling to you, or is this something that anyone can kind of just pick up and learn? Or is it something that, was just meant for you?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question, and one that sometimes I wrestle with and sometimes I don't. Honestly, when I was dropped into that room full of lights, I found a supportive community at my undergrad where I was able to really flourish and find chances to do something that I wouldn't have done before, take risks. And I just naturally gravitated to engaging all parts of my brain, not just the left brain and not just the right brain. And while I was at Fullerton, what I did was I took that sort of passion behind the TV, the film, the theater, combining all those into those multiple majors, and then transferred where I was working in attractions at Disneyland, where it was Space Mountain and Star Tours. And I was, happiest place on earth, helping people find joy in their day by escaping reality. At one point, I decided I would transfer into another department. And that department was technical services. It was to become a stage technician, which was to follow more in line with what my career goals were going to be, matching my educational goals. And the combination of the work and the combination of the school was something that solidified my passion for both design, technical elements, and really drove my decisions on how I would find my career path moving forward. And it really was like opportunities were abound, right? I was able to work on, like you had said, cruise ships. So I took brand new cruise ships out of Italy and got on them, and nobody had been on them before. And as they're sailing to get to their actual port of call, we were lighting the shows and we were supporting all of the shows that were happening anywhere from the main stage to the lounges, everything that you see. It's a little comedian over here or a performer over, piano player over there. They all need to be seen. And so the light helps with that. Or Seattle Opera, or working at the El Capitan in Hollywood, where we're, highlighting a little show before you got to see the holiday movie that was in that season. So those are the kinds of opportunities that were lighting specific, many of which came from both my time at Cal State Fullerton and the network I built there, my time at UCLA and the network I built there, and then also what I was doing for Disney.
Mm-hmm. So at Cal State Fullerton, when you were doing your undergrad, the things that you were doing, you were working in communications and theater. Are there a lot of opportunities for internships outside of the school itself? Because I know a lot of people, they participate in the plays and the events that go on campus, but is there a lot of things that you can do off campus regarding those majors?
So pre-pandemic, and I'm sure soon enough post-pandemic, I think those opportunities will come back. Right now, this exact moment is a little bit of a difficult time as businesses, especially in California, start to return to some sense of normalcy and whatever the new normalcy will be. But I think that for me at the time, there were plenty of different kinds of internships. It just depended on, and this is one piece of advice I'll give you, is having that open mind. So the internship that was available to me at the time was The Tonight Show. And it was something I interviewed for, was able to get to, and found it to be a really difficult experience because of how they treated the interns and the others. It was just a disjointed program and it was a struggle. And I had to, weigh that as a, very early, barely in my career person, taking a risk to say, what, this isn't the right environment in order for me to be able to thrive. Sure, it's a well-known, at the time it was The Tonight Show with Jay Leno, right? So it's a well-known at the time show. that is critical to if I want to be in TV or film, that I needed to succeed there. But I had to take a risk and take a step back and say, this isn't the right thing because of how they treated the staff, not because it was just the person they had in charge of it was not equipped to lead it. And that was the issue. And so I took a step back and took another risk and decided to find another internship within that same semester and was able to do it at Fox Publicity. And so I was now working in the publicity department, which is a step away from production and other kinds of film and TV. Having that open mind really allowed me to do that. And from there, I learned a whole other set of skills, which allowed me to flourish and grow, which allowed me to then have a better network that I never would have done had I said, oh, no, that's PR or publicity. It's just not for me. And so it's about not turning down opportunities if they're even tangential, if they're close.
So I guess that's like a good bit of advice that we can take as students. If you do find a good opportunity like you did, if it doesn't pay and it requires a lot of work, then maybe we shouldn't take it. Or if it doesn't treat its employees right or its interns right, even though it's a nice job, it might pay well, or it might be great on a resume, then maybe it's not worth taking it. And maybe it's just better to find something else that, at least you realize your own self-worth and what your value is, and just respecting yourself over just like, kind of working and just giving it all for a company that doesn't respect you. So
yeah, I think that's a pretty fair assessment of that. I think, look, there's going to be hard jobs. It doesn't mean they're not treating you well. Just the work is hard. The hours are long. That is different than somebody who doesn't know how to lead or manage, is belittling, is not a healthy work environment. That is a different piece. And there are going to be paid and unpaid jobs. Unpaid jobs are okay. That's called volunteer work, right? And that is okay. Unpaid internships, I'm not a big fan of such things. And some people take a risk and will do that. We at Disney, we don't do that. They are paid internships. They're not unpaid internships, right? There is a value that needs to be placed on that. And it is a much healthier environment to do that. So I would agree with you. You really have to assess and sometimes make a hard choice.
Mm-hmm. And paid internships kind of break the barrier of inequality, where there are some students who they're fortunate enough not to have to work on campus. And in doing so, they can take those internships that do not pay because they're not reliant on it. They don't have another job that they would have to leave for it. But in making all internships paid, we kind of break that barrier. And anyone who, even if they need a job or if they don't need a job, they're still getting paid for their work that they're doing. So even though volunteer work is great, it should be left at that, volunteering, not working. So there should be a difference.
There's plenty of unpaid work when it comes to student productions or where you're working in the theater at those. That's not typically getting paid. That is investing in your education, but not necessarily through a monetary value. So I think you're right about that, and definitely it's good advice.
Mm-hmm. So I have a question about your double major. Did you have a initial choice between communications and theater, or did you decide to do a double major right off the bat?
I didn't decide to do that. I felt like, so I walked in, as mentioned before, communications with the TV film emphasis. And I definitely was looking to fill my time a little bit more. As I had mentioned, I always wanted to have a full docket. That's just where I was the most comfortable. And when I have that little bit of pressure, it allowed me to also sort of drive toward more success. So when I was looking at it, I was interested in a number of different areas. Criminal justice was one area that I was interested in. Theater was another area that I had interest. Having done, high school productions, that was kind of a natural draw to where I wanted to go. And so what I did was I took time to explore, and I said, let me take some classes in both and let me understand where this goes. And having that opportunity really allowed me to solidify direction and choices. Ultimately, I landed on theater after taking that small assessment period, for which I am happy that I did. I don't expect that I would have been disappointed had I done anything else. It just ended up in a good direction.
I see. So would you recommend other students to look into a double major, or would you maybe recommend them to, if they do kind of change their mind or they're trying to focus on something else, maybe switch their major or maybe take up a minor instead?
So how I think about this is there's a lot of pressure on what is your direction, what are your goals, what is your major, you have to pick now, and it must be this, and you got to pick it and go. And there are others who are, I'm changing my major every other weekend because it's hard for me. I don't want to do whatever the case may be. And maybe there's other legit reasons. Oh, I really don't like this. I think there is a balance somewhere in the middle there that allows us to say, take a moment, get a little bit of experience in the things that you find interesting. And if you can do that, then start to commit. Or if you know what you're going into, but you also have an interest somewhere, maybe consider a minor or some other thing that gives you a little extra focus in that area, because you never really know what you're going to do. My dad was a political science major, but a computer science minor. He knew it was something that was coming down the line and was interested, got a little extra focus, and that ended up being his career. And so you just never really know. And what it does is it kind of hedges your bets. It kind of gives you a little bit more breadth, a little bit more experience, a little bit more to talk about when you're in an interview, and allows you flexibility. That is just one take. Some people can't do that because they have to work another job. They have to spend their time at school and doing something else. None of that is lost on me. And just because you aren't able to double major or take a minor, it doesn't mean that you can't be successful in that way. I would just advocate for taking a few more electives in that interest, but don't declare that you need to go to a minor or another major, because it still gives you that opportunity to do that within your normal school schedule so that you're not hindered by whatever else is taking up your time, which is often very valid.
Mm-hmm. And that kind of ties in what you mentioned before of having an open mind. In doing so, you're not kind of stuck on that specific major that you did choose when you were 17 or 18.
That's
like
right.
you said, they kind of expect you to choose a major and just go through with it and finish it without maybe double checking yourself or just wondering if it is the right thing that you do want to go in. And then taking these extra classes, it helps you know if what you chose is correct. Because if you do have that passion somewhere else, you might not change your major, you might still finish it with it, but you might look into jobs that utilize those classes a bit more and what you learned a bit more instead of maybe sticking with what you originally did. So I guess it is better in the sense that you don't have to worry about changing jobs later in the future or maybe going back to school years or maybe even decades after you graduated initially because you did take those extra classes, maybe spent an extra semester, an extra year, just playing around, just having an open mind and seeing what there is that the school has to offer you.
Yeah, I think flexibility is also key, right? It's just having that you can adapt, you can be flexible. And one of those ways is to have more experience, because the more experience you have. And for me, I take every experience that I have, and it forms and informs all those decisions that I have to make down the road. I was lighting and also audio. I did sound design for at Cal State Fullerton and also at UCLA. And when I did that, I also took a costuming class and I took a makeup class. And I'll tell you, at the time, it was interesting. It was challenging. It was way outside of my wheelhouse in terms of I was making a dress for someone that I had never done before. Or I was putting makeup on myself or stage makeup or changing how I looked dramatically using prosthetics. But I'll tell you, that experience informed when I later in life, however many years later, I was now overseeing the costuming and cosmetology department as one of my areas of, that I was overseeing at Disney. I'm not saying I knew how to do their job, and I would never pretend to know how to do their job, but that little experience helped inform what I could ask, where I could go, what I could do. And so I had no idea that opening my mind earlier on would lead to helping a team be more successful because I could ask better questions. And that's how I took it away.
Mm-hmm. And then I guess it kind of like ties into what you mentioned before. Maybe the boss at that time didn't know how to lead with the Tonight Show, but if you do have that bit of an experience where you kind of took a bit of those classes or you learned a little bit about what the employees or interns do, you can kind of relate and understand where they're coming from or what you can expect from them. Because a lot of the disconnect comes from when the employees and the employer are not on the same page because they have a different background or a different set of education with that field. Where I know this is a lot with game design as well, where the people high up try and expect way too much from people who work in game design. Meanwhile, they're kind of working on the artwork. And I guess it kind of does tie in a bit to theater, TV, and film because a lot of those features that we do see, we kind of look over and we kind of take for granted all the work that goes into it when it's actually quite a bit. So I guess there's a little bit of disconnect, but by taking those extra classes and learning that extra bit of information, you're kind of just taking that extra step to ensuring that you're able to be as well-rounded as possible.
That's exactly right. Exactly.
So the work that you did at Disney when you were an intern, what was that again? What that like entail?
When I was an intern, I was actually at Fox. And so at Fox, I was, it's funny to think about what we had to do then versus what we do now. But I was doing a lot of clipping. And what's clipping, of course, is reading every industry magazine, every newspaper from around the world that was delivered and finding any reference to the word Fox or British Sky Broadcasting or Rupert Murdoch or anything that related to the Fox company, and then clipping them out, putting them on pieces of paper, and then copying all that and delivering them to all the executives. So they had a quick reference. Now today it's aggregated through technology, which is fine. But I'll tell you, I learned so much about that company having to go through all of those industry magazines, having to read all of those newspapers, having to grab all of that data, having to ask questions around, oh, is this relevant? No, it's not. Is this relevant? Oh, yes, it is. And putting it all together, that it really gave me an appreciation and understanding of just what kind of research it takes to learn about a subject. And it was fascinating and it was great. And ultimately got me to a place where they asked me to write press releases that would then be released. And at the time, and this was, a fair number of years ago, but there was Robbie Knievel, who was a motorcycle stunt rider of Evel Knievel was his dad. And he was going to do a stunt live on TV for Fox. And I had to write 2 press releases, one if he was successful and one if he wasn't successful. And I had to have both of them ready to go. And it was another one of those, it's about writing. It's about emotion in or not emotion in what's being written. It's about contingencies, about, well, if it works, it needs to be this. Don't assume it's going to work because it may not. So what are we going to write about here? And it was such an interesting experience. And it was great. And I was on the lot at Century City, which if anybody has seen Die Hard would know it is Nakatomi Plaza. And I was seeing the sets down below. And I was really immersed in an environment that was about television. And it was amazing. And I couldn't advocate more for those opportunities and experiences. And while I was dreading the internship part, if I'm being completely honest, because I had a million other things to do and I didn't want to have to do one more thing, I'll tell you that it was a huge imprint on who I am and how I could succeed moving forward.
I see. So you've seen how the industry has changed in the past 2 decades. Do you kind of have like a prediction, or do you think it'll kind of stay the same going forward, maybe in the next 10 to 20 years?
Well, I certainly, you know what, it's so interesting. Another great question. So thank you for asking good questions. The idea, how is it going to change? We've seen in the previous year, how dramatically and how quickly everything had to change and people could adapt. And things that I had wished for years about, can we leverage QR codes? Can we reduce waste on terms of how we're doing, menus? Can we do these other, whatever it is? For me, it was amazing to see that turnaround and how we did that. I think that the world, of course, like everything else that we're seeing today, is much more digital, right? And soon it will be much more, how does it work in your home? As other things like this come about, we have group experiences, but we've been doing the same group experience, going to the movie theater, going to the places. And I think a lot of that is going to be more about, as people moved away from the big cities and into these other smaller towns, how do we get that experience into your home? Those are the trends that I see moving forward. And I'm one person who's just reading and watching and looking. And you can already sort of see it through the streaming wars about how do we get it into your home. But there is something to be said about that live connected experience. And that is why I continue to work for a company that has theme parks around the world. And what do we do about making that live connected experience even more dynamic so that people want to come and visit?
Mm-hmm. And I kind of heard with theme parks that they're kind of trying to move and integrate sort of AR into it, so and virtual reality as well. So instead of it just being or taking up space and having only one experience, because I know at Disneyland they would have to shut down different rides in order to make space for other rides or completely rehaul everything that is going on. I know I don't go to Disney so often, but I think it was Tower of Terror, and they changed
Right.
that to something else. I forgot what they changed
Guardians
that
of
to.
the Galaxy
Guardians of the
Mission
Galaxy.
Breakout. Yeah.
Yep. So that took quite a lot of time. It wasn't like an overnight change. But if
Right.
you do integrate VR and AR and get that digital experience in, then it literally is an overnight change. And it could be a personal experience too. Just because you're on a ride with 20 people doesn't mean all 20 of you would be able to see the same thing. Maybe you could change that experience to make it more personable. So I guess that's where it's kind of going, making it more personable and um, not
It,
having
it
so much like groupthink with it.
it definitely is. It is personalized. What do you want? Right. And
Mm-hmm.
you're going to see more and more, I think, in the future of what do you want? And everything is starting to focus on the individual rather than saying, here's what everybody wants. No, it's what do you want out of this? And so it's an exciting future. It is a different future. It's not it's not the world I walked into and not the world that I was sort of setting myself up to do. And some people work for 20 years because they think that the road is predictable. And then 10 years in, the road has changed, and another 5 years in, the road has changed again. And they're like, well, wait, but that I had a promise that back when I was doing what I was doing, it would get me to where I wanted to be. But now you're saying there's like a bend over there. That wasn't there before. That goes back to my adaptability and flexibility advice is, the same thing. You've heard it once, you'll hear it again. That right. The only constant thing is change. So, and that couldn't be more true. So how do we adapt to the change rather than fighting constancy?
Mm-hmm. And especially in a field that utilizes technology, the change is going to come so much sooner rather than later. So you kind of do have to be ready for that experience and ready for that change. Because if you're not ready for the change, then you're kind of going to be left in the dust, and then you're going to fall behind all these new guys who are coming up, taking your jobs then.
That's right. Exactly right.
Mm-hmm. So I just had a couple of questions about working at Disneyland.
Sure.
Is this like a place is it like the happiest place on earth to work on as well, as well as visit?
I will tell you that I am now in my 29th year, I believe,
Wow.
which is amazing for me to even suggest that it would have been that long, but I'm pretty sure I was doing the math earlier, and that's where it is. So there is something about being in a place for that period of time and what I believe is a rock solid place to work. And certainly it has ups and downs, and the pandemic times teach everyone that there are ups and downs with everything. I think of anything, it's what you make of it. And you can walk in there with a negative and poor attitude and be somebody who works at Disneyland with a negative and poor attitude, and it won't last long because it's not really accepted. But I'll tell you that people will sometimes linger on that, where you walk in there with the attitude that says, I'm going to make a difference today, or we're going to do a great job. And that's mostly why I work there, is for those people. And I think that it's definitely, it is. And what's interesting is also just how much more focus on inclusion and making sure that we're representative of the world outside of the castles, that we make sure that we're hearing all voices and that we're really focused on how we, open our arms to bring in more. It really is spectacular to see those changes continue to evolve. I don't know if you heard just the other day, they released a new Disney look. That's our guideline for how people look at the park, which included new things like tattoos and also no more gender, that you can be free to be your authentic self. And that is something that is, it's mind blowing that we're able to get to a place that allows people to express themselves much more openly.
Mm-hmm. Because Disney has always been sort of strict in the past, but now that they're being a little bit more open is fantastic, and just being more mindful of everyone around them. And yeah, like the place you work at is kind of what you make of it. Like you said, if you come in with a negative attitude every day, I guess it's not just Disney, it's any job you work at.
Any
People
job
don't
you
like
work
that.
at.
And then
That's
even
right.
at school as well, like if you're in a group project or in a classroom, it's just not what people like. It's just that negative attitude isn't great. So it's
That's
kind
right.
of
It's
just
what you
walking
bring
with the
to it.
flow.
And
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't matter if it's the happiest place on earth or the roughest group assignment you've ever had. If you go in with a negative attitude, that's what people are going to walk away with. And I would hate for people to think of me or anyone to have that. And so I just won't let that happen.
Mm-hmm. And we're going to ask him these quick fire questions and then get into a bit about what he does currently at Disney and then a bit of advice that he has to give to students.
I'm ready.
Awesome. So the first question is coffee versus tea?
Tea.
Tea. Undergrad or graduate school?
Undergraduate school? I'll go with that.
Awesome. Are you an early bird or a night owl?
I am, I would say a night owl.
So do you prefer math or language arts?
Oh my goodness, that is a tough one. I'm going to say language arts.
I see. And I guess this would be applicable to your major. If you had to choose one major only, would it be communications or theater?
Theater.
Oh, I see. So city or the woods?
The city.
And then the last question, tacos, waffles, or pancakes?
See? Tacos.
Yeah.
It's always got to be tacos.
Those tacos. Do you have a favorite taco place? Is there a go-to that you love?
Oh, yeah. So over up or in West LA, Tito's Tacos.
Next time I'm in West LA, I'll go ahead and check it out.
So good.
What is your favorite ride at Disneyland?
Okay. My favorite ride at Disneyland is I'm going to go with Space Mountain.
Oh, that's a good one. That's a good choice. And then your favorite eatery at Disneyland?
Oh, my favorite eatery at Disneyland. I am a big fan of the moody and dark Blue Bayou. Oh, that's the one inside the Pirates of the Caribbean, right? Mm-hmm. Right. The Pirates of the Caribbean is right next to it. It is about the atmosphere for that one. Mm-hmm. But if you're talking about the food, mm-hmm. I would have to say like Lamplight Lounge over at California Adventure. That has lobster nachos. It's really good.
I see. I would say for food, I suck at this whole Disney thing. I think my best memory is we got an annual pass when I was really young, when I was in the 4th or 5th grade. Yeah. And then every Wednesday we had early dismissal. So my mom would take us out of school an extra hour early. We would head over there, and then we would always get the soft serves right on California Pier or something like that.
So good. So good. Great. That is awesome.
And I think the churros are also unbeatable, and you kind of just can't beat that.
Oh yeah, no, they are really good.
Awesome. All right, so let's get into a bit of what you do at Disney. So in the beginning, you were kind of just working. I wouldn't say the lower tier jobs, but you were kind of just working as a technical director and a stage technician, and then you kind of started moving up. So afterwards, you started working as a production manager, and then afterwards, what you're currently doing is you're the director for entertainment services.
That's right. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Ask your question.
So how did you kind of transition from how did you kind of move up from your past jobs into being the director? And what was it like to do these transitions? And what do you currently do now?
So that's great. Thank you. I think, going from being a stage technician, which it was definitely on the front line, behind the scenes, working on Fantasmic, doing the stunt rigging for the pirates on the Columbia, which is that big pirate ship that would go around for Peter Pan and Captain Hook. That was crazy. And then I jumped from being someone who was paid hourly into someone who was salaried as a technical director. And that was a big transition, something that went from you're paid for every hour that you work, including overtime, to someone who's on a base salary. And also different kind of work, because the work that I was doing as stage technician is union and bargained work. And when you become salaried, you can no longer do that kind of work. So for me, it became what's the right hands-off approach that allows me to be effective. The great thing about the technical director role was that it was actually in Hong Kong. So I was opening a brand new park, never been opened before, living in Hong Kong for a year. And it was really an amazing experience to be able to live and work internationally on a project. And once we opened it, it was very fulfilling. And then I found myself needing to find other work, because when the project is done, what's next? there wasn't anything on the docket. And I was able to return back to the Disneyland Resort as a production manager, as you had mentioned. And that was just another mind shift of what we do. But I took what technical information I knew and how to operate with a team like that and applied it to schedules and budgets, which again, every experience, as I mentioned earlier, every experience I fed into what informed decision I needed to make. So now that I had all this technical information and all this experience, I was able to use that to make better and stronger budgets and schedules that helped us be more successful as a team. More so, I was really able to ask the right questions of the team because I never wanted to assume their work. But what I could do was ask the right questions. Back to that costuming example and what I was doing. So from there, I jumped out of production. Well, I worked on that as a producer, production manager, lots of new shows, parades, marathons, all kinds of different work that was happening out there. And then I was plucked from that area and moved over into a manager role, overseeing a diverse group of people who worked on the strategy of shows and really the how what's our capacity of our venues and what kind of work are we going to do and where are our characters at any given time, that kind of strategy. A systems and technology team that was supporting a worldwide entertainment effort. So we made sure that all the business technology, what systems we used to budget. We weren't using Excel. We were using something else that would allow us to be more nimble. And then choreographers. It was, like I said, a diverse set of teams. So people who, worked together to make sure that our shows looked amazing. And it was a hard transition at that point. I was now leading a direct team instead of influencing others. And I was I was struggling with it, to be honest with you, because I'll go back to my track was on production. I was on that track and I was going that way. And then there was a bend in the road. And now I was doing this totally different job, a job that I was not passionate about. And I realized that I was walking in with a non-productive attitude. I wasn't mean and I wasn't angry, but I was bristling. And it was hard for me to really focus and be my best self in that job. And one day, fortunately for me, I had the wherewithal to recognize that, to be self-aware, another amazing trait that I would recommend people can do. I don't do it well or all the time, but when I do it, I'm excited about it. To be self-aware is a great one, or to have people who can help shake you out of your funk. And what I did was I realized that that's how people were seeing me. They saw me as grumpy or not really delivering. And I knew that was going to be a real problem. And I turned it around. I started to engage differently. I started to think through it differently and change my approach. My job didn't change. I changed. I changed my approach. And once I did that, it was within months that I got promoted to another job. I mean, it was that tangible on how we did that. I tell that story only because I know a lot of people are in jobs they don't necessarily like, and they either have to find another job or change their attitude, because sometimes it's a little bit of both.
So you kind of did give a great bit of advice right there, that being self-aware is something that even if we do go in with that negative attitude, or we do know that we're not the best, just knowing that is the first step of fixing it, because a lot of people out there, they don't like to accept it, or they don't like to acknowledge it even, that what they're doing can be fixed. They kind of just go in thinking that this is the way to be, when in reality, just knowing that, okay, this might not be the right thing. And then it kind of does sometimes take other people, their ability to kind of let you know, but it still takes that acknowledgement from yourself to understand that they're right, and then just working on it and fixing it. So it kind of just shows that not everyone is perfect. We all have our faults, and just working on it is kind of the best thing that we can do. But with the places that you work at Disney, it kind of just shows that you were given a challenge at each step of the way, and each time you did it, you were put into a different position, which was maybe even more challenging, but you kind of did learn from those past experiences, and you kind of just took that knowledge that they kind of gave you in the past and kind of put you up to the next challenge, where you wouldn't just be able to come in and just start working as a manager or a director right off the bat because you just didn't have that experience.
That's right. That's exactly right. And it was super challenging. And once I got through the steps that were my own personal blocks, then it became much more fulfilling in how I did my job. And pretty much after that, I started to lead teams across the board. I had teams in both California and Florida, leading technical teams out there, traveling back and forth often, traveling around the world to help make sure that the teams were supported in the productions and roles that they were doing. And ultimately, it led me to where I am today. So today I'm the director of entertainment services. I liken it to all the behind the scenes entertainment that you never really see, but mostly focused on stage technicians, of which we remember I was one. So stage technicians, all the technical designers like lighting, sound, video, show control, fireworks, those kinds of design disciplines. The technical directors, these are the people who are pulling together the creative idea, forming it into how we can actually deliver it, and then giving it over to the stage technicians to operate. And a sustainment team that allows us to make sure that our shows look as amazing on day 365 as they do on day one. So they make sure that all of our maintenance plans are in place, that all of our documentation, like training tools and everything, is consistent and taught the same way. We audit everything to help make sure that we're doing it right throughout because our shows run almost every day year round. And so it's really important. And then the last group I have is the guest talent programs, which is a group that allows students to come to the park and either perform, take a workshop with a clinician, or to be able to take educational programs using Disneyland or California Adventure as a laboratory or space for which they can explore playground as it is.
So I kind of like how Disneyland is sort of inclusive with that as well. They understand that students kind of need that experience, or they would like to, because Disneyland is sort of like the dream job sort of for a lot of students. We see adults as well, with Disneyland opening up. We saw the videos of like adults crying at Disneyland because they just have great fond memories of it. And the experiences there are sort of unbeat, even though there's so many other theme parks, so many other streaming services. Disneyland is kind of that universal idea. But yeah, so the work that you've done, it's kind of just again ties back to everything that you've done before, managing those technical directors, because you've done that work, and then the stage directors as well. So it is kind of nice how Disneyland incorporates everything with students as well, and then they also just make sure that everything is pretty streamlined, because it does seem like a well-oiled machine, even though it's completely international. And like you mentioned, things are happening every single day with shows, movies, and with everything Disney owns, which is quite a bit. They just have so much to take care of, but it still just runs cleanly all behind the scenes. And that's kind of like a motif of the work that you've been doing, I guess, for like the past 2 decades, like you mentioned. It's all just behind the scenes technical work that is required, no doubt, but it's just something that we don't appreciate or we don't see at the front end of things.
I take stock. Like I know that when people aren't questioning what is that thing or wondering what that thing is, and it's just magically happening in front of them, that we're doing our job right. And so I think that, it goes back to sort of that diversity of my experience feeds into the diversity of the role that I'm in right now. And it allows me an opportunity to help build and grow a team with a shorthand, because I do have some of that experience. It doesn't mean that I know everything, and I wouldn't pretend to say that I know everything. It just, like I said, it gives me the opportunity to ask better questions.
So let's just end it off with a bit of advice that you have for students. Let's say the first being someone who is majoring in theater, right? And then let's say it's maybe their 3rd or 4th year starting in the pandemic, and they didn't hit an internship or any place where they could work or just practice. So what do you think they should do now, considering a lot of places weren't open for them to work, and then they're maybe graduating this year, or they already graduated without that experience on their belt as a student?
It's really challenging, and there's no question. I think openly acknowledging the challenge that is in front is a healthy way to make sure that we're all on the same page. I think that it comes down to, are you flexible? Are you adaptable? And I wouldn't just answer those questions for myself. I would ask some of your trusted friends to see what they think, because they may say, well, you are a little bit XYZ when it comes to this, that, or the other. And we want to make sure that we're getting honest. That helps with the self-awareness, that having that trusted circle of friends. I think that you need to build and tap your network. There is a network at Cal State Fullerton who and there's alumni at Cal State Fullerton who are still connected to the theater department. There are other opportunities that are out there that allow connection and work. And sometimes it won't be, I can jump into being a lighting designer. It may be I started off as a stage technician, or I started off as something else, knowing that I had another goal in mind. the road for me was not a ladder, right? It was not straight up. It was winding. And sometimes I went backwards and then I kind of curved around and came back up. It really is kind of more like a snake, and sometimes it goes back. And I think that as we remember that, in the past, people might have thought it was much more linear, that it was only like up or ramping or going this way. Like it's not really that. And if we remember those kinds of things, I think it helps us know that we can take opportunities and know that it doesn't have to be forever. Sometimes people get locked into, oh, if I do this now, then I have to stick with it for 5 years before I can get anywhere. No, you keep working with your network and you're going to meet new people and you're going to show them how great you are. And that's what is going to get you the next job. Not coming in there feeling embittered or sad or victimized by what is truly a challenging situation. It's how are you going to make success out of that, not say, oh, woe is me.
And then, so let's say someone who wants to work at Disney, and then what would kind of be the first steps? Like, what are the opportunities that Disney has outside of just lighting and being a technical director?
So there are tons of different kinds of roles, whether it's I am a performer, whether I am in the creative field, I'm an art director or a lighting designer, or I want to just be there because it's so much fun and you can work anywhere, because there are a lot of sort of frontline opportunities that are much easier to get to. Now, that won't always get you to whatever your end goal might be, but it is definitely the start. And that's a great way to go. I think it's always, the website is always the way to go. And when the internships come back, and I imagine they will in the next, who knows, but I can't imagine it's going to go on forever. There's a website for that. And so that either go to the disneyinterns.com site or the disneycareers.com site. Either of those are the best entry into getting into all kinds of different jobs. And the Disney Careers one is for everything, is for Fox, for Marvel, for Pixar, for Disneyland, for Walt Disney World, for Aulani in Hawaii, for the cruise ships, for corporate, Imagineering, all of it lives in that one area. And there may not be a whole lot right now because the work is just coming back and the state still hasn't quite lifted all of the restrictions. But within the next 6-8 months, I expect that we're probably going to be seeing more opportunity become available. And for those that are into performing or acting, casting calls go out on normal channels. And if you follow the social channels, there's always opportunity.
So those are great bits of advice for the students trying to get into that field. And then just one last question to end it off. Your favorite Disney park and why?
Well, I think I am going to go with Disneyland. I'll tell you, I've been to all of our parks multiple times. I love Tokyo Disney because of just its clean, amazing, pristine beauty. But I really have an affinity toward Walt's original park. And whether or not it has to do with Walt Disney or not, I just think that it is iconic, is nostalgic. It's always growing and always changing. And I'm a huge fan of that kind of gleaming jewel that kicked it all off in, 1955. It was just one of those pieces. But I'll tell you, it is a harder question than that because I have something for every single park that we have out there. I mean, Hong Kong is amazing and I loved those things. But if you're going to ask me to pick one, I'm going to stick with the original.
So that is it for the podcast. And just a bit of advice that I have to give to students is David is on our Titan Pro network. And basically what that is our own personal site where students, alumni, faculty, and staff can all connect with one another in a very simple, easy to use manner. And in it, you can find people from specific industries, from specific job titles, job sites, and from specific majors. So if you are majoring in theater or communications and if you found what David said was interesting, be sure to reach out to him. So it's very easy to sign up. You just head on over to Titan Pro Network or just search it up on Google. It's the first link on there. And then with it, you just sign in with your LinkedIn, which makes it really easy to do. Go ahead and sign up and then reach out to these people because they have that experience. They know what it's like in the industry. They know what it's like to major in these majors that you are currently taking. So that is my bit of advice. Go ahead and do that because the advice on there, it's so plentiful. I believe we have over 1,000 alumni already signed up. And so there's someone for everyone. I'm sure you can definitely find an alumni or a faculty or a staff who has been in a similar experience to you and can maybe help you get through some things, or maybe just give you that bit of advice that you need to further your career or further your education.
Oh, well, I'd be all too happy to chat with people. So it's really a great opportunity to do that too. Don't ask me for a job, but ask me any other question. I can do that.
Awesome. So again, thank you, David, for joining us on the podcast today.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. It was a great time.